Should you live with your parents or should you move out as soon as humanly possible and, of course, try to be as independent as you can? I want to give my honest perspective of this as someone who lived with my mom for the first half of my 20s, and then at the age of about 25, I moved out and I've been living alone for about 2.5 years. Since December of 2023 was when I moved out. I had previously moved out before, about a year prior, and I lived for about 7 to 8 months. Then I moved back in temporarily, which is a whole other story in itself. And then I moved out again at 25, or like 26, right around there. And 2023 ended that year. And then since then, I've pretty much been living solo at this place right here. So I want to give you the pros and cons of why you should live with your parents, why you should continue living with your parents, and why you might want to move out as quickly as possible. And this will, of course, depend on your scenario and what you might feel is best for you. So take the information that I give here and just apply it to where you see fit. And then I will give you kind of both perspectives and kind of the pros and cons of both, right? So when it comes to living with your parents, of course, the main benefit is you can save money easier. And so if you are going to go this route, then I recommend that you try to save as much as possible and, don't be like spending on a bunch of like stupid stuff regularly. And so that is kind of one mistake that I made when I was living with my mom, like I had a lot more disposable income. And one other thing that I will share about myself is every single job that I had throughout from the age of 19 to like when I moved out was within walking distance of where I lived. So because of this, I also did not have a car payment at all. So I just walked to and from work. It was a 20-minute walk, and I worked at like 3 different stores. I was a bagger at one store. I worked in a dollar store, and then I worked in a liquor store. All of them were kind of within that same area. So I kind of worked at those 3 different places within the span of like, 7 to 8 years, kind of around there. So if I'm like remembering the exact details, but yeah, it was kind of around there. Like I would have walked that same path to and from. And, from that, I was just able to have a lot more like, spare income basically, right? So that is going to be the main benefit of living with your parents. Now, in my case, the main downside when it came to living with parents is the fact that you have very little privacy and you feel like you kind of, in a way, feel like you're a kid in a sense. Like one thing that I vividly remember feeling when I was living with my mom, I was living in my mom's basement, by the way. I remember feeling very embarrassed and not wanting anyone to see me in that living situation, right? So I lived in a very dark basement. There was a lot of noise. There was like the washing machine going on. There was the pipe of the toilet right next to my bed. So whenever someone like went to the bathroom, basically I could hear every sound that you could imagine. And then on top of that, there'd be like a bunch of bugs and centipedes all around. So it was a very grimy, very grungy type of environment that I was in for quite a while. And so again, the benefit was I was able to save more money. I had more disposable income, but the downside was the fact that, I was in kind of an embarrassing living situation, right? And then I also lived with about like 5 other people. I lived with my brother, my sister, my mom and her boyfriend, and then my brother's girlfriend, soon to be wife as of right now, lived with us at the time when they first started dating. So that was about like 5 other people that I was living with for a while. And this was in a very tiny house, kind of like there was a basement that both me and my brother shared. And then upstairs right above me was my sister's room. And then my mom and her boyfriend had their own room as well. So oftentimes there, would be like a lot of drama going on. There'd be a lot of, kind of back and forth between a few people every now and then. And that would often stress me out. And when it came to working, like for instance, in my case, I worked at these jobs, and then on the side of that, I had this online business that I was building, right? And so, off on the side of my 9 to 5, I would come home. I would try to spend as much of my free time as possible, just trying to make money online. And because I often felt stressed out, kind of being in this situation, it made it very difficult for me to be as focused on, working online and doing that type of stuff, right? So I would be doing things like creating content, making videos, and I would try to be as consistent as possible. When you're kind of in like a really noisy environment, then it could be kind of chaotic at times. So that was kind of my motivation for why I felt that I needed to get out as quickly as possible. The struggle that I had along the way was the cost of apartments was way above my budget. With my regular jobs that I was working, they were barely enough for me to like live on my own, unless if I had like, maybe like a roommate or two. But I didn't want to go that route. I'm like, if I'm already living with people, I might as well just, stay where I'm at. And then on top of that, most apartments, when you apply to them, you gotta show that you're making like 3 times the rent basically than what the actual monthly rent is. So that is one common theme that I keep seeing with a lot of younger folks, and why a lot of them are having a hard time like moving out, living on their own, and more young folks are staying with their parents, up until like the age of like 30 for some people, which is kind of chaotic. So I'll kind of talk about, how I ended up moving out on my own. And then I'll also talk about the pros of living solo, right? So when it comes to living on your own, I've been at this place for about 2.5 years. The main benefit of living on my own is I have peace and quiet. And so this for me is the number one thing that I value like most of all when it comes to living on my own. And there's also a lot of sunlight. So like currently right now, the sky is like kind of dim because there's like this Canadian wildfire thing going on. But oftentimes it'd be sunny out, I'd have sunlight, and that would make me feel a lot more calm and at peace, versus when I was in my parents' basement, it was very dark. I felt very depressed often at times. And I didn't really feel too energetic in that environment, right? Whereas here, I'm a lot more at peace, and I can, it's easier for me to focus on certain things, right? So that is the main benefit of living on my own. Now, the downside, of course, is the fact that, you have to pay bills, right? So in my case, the rent that I pay at this place is about $11.75 per month, which I think is actually not too bad considering, cost of apartments going up. And I'm seeing a lot of them in my area that are like $1,500, $1,600, some of them $2,000 a month. I live in Wisconsin, so, compared to other states that I've looked at, like New York, California, Florida, these other states, cost of living is a lot worse in those places, and it's a lot harder to live on your own. So, me being in the Midwest, I don't think this area is as bad as other places. And so that's just what I've observed personally. But even where I live, prices of apartments is continuing to go up as well. And so I've even just kind of looked at like different listings just to see like what it would cost for me to move out like right now if I was still living with my parents. And yeah, I don't know if I would be able to pull it off again, and if I had to like start over, unless if like I we're just making like a ton of money basically. And that's just something that I've observed, right? So I want to talk about how I was able to move out on my own, and then I'll talk about, whether or not you should, of course, take the route of actually moving out on your own, right? So if you are in a living situation right now where, you're living with a bunch of people and you just really want that privacy and you feel like that is worth having, then I believe that is in your best interest to try to move out as quickly as possible. And then on the flip side, if you feel like cost of living is too high where you're at, then what I would recommend looking into is see if you could maybe perhaps move to a smaller city where cost of living is lower, and see what opportunities are out there, see what you can make. So there is a bit of digging that you have to do, but personally for me, what I did that helped me move out was I actually got this place completely furnished, by the way. So that was because this place I lived at was originally an Airbnb. I lived here while I was in Airbnb for a bit, and I kept renewing it every month until the owner basically just kind of offered it to me, and then just kind of said like, hey, if you want, you could just rent this place just, directly for me, and then you could just pay a bit less every month. So I was originally paying like $1,300 a month, and then now it's like $1,175. So, not too bad actually. And, for a place that is furnished, I just found it's easier. And because I kept making the payments every month, and she's seen that I had stable income coming in, then I also had this online business that I was building, then I guess she trusted me to actually, live here long term. And so since then I've been living here consistently, right? So as far as moving on your own, what I recommend is, of course, you want to have some sort of stable income coming in. I recommend doing a bit of job hopping in the beginning, because if you are working like a minimum wage position, then you're probably not going to be able to move out on your own. So I would recommend try to get the highest paying job in your area that you could find, apply to it multiple times over and over and over again until you get hired. Just try and manifest that you get the job. Or the other option that I recommend going with is you have your job, maybe it's a decent paying job, and then on the side of it, you want to have some sort of secondary income. And so for me, what I did outside of work was I had my online business that I was building, and then I would just do things like posting content, and I would aim to build an income online as well. And so that also made it easier for me to live comfortably in Airbnbs. I kind of went that route for a bit until I was offered a place. And then the whole benefit when it came to moving in here was I didn't have to furnish everything on my own, basically. So that was kind of the route that I took. Otherwise, the alternative that I would recommend looking into is find a way to make an income online and then become geographically free, and then live wherever the cost of living is lowest that you could find, right? So that is going to give you the ultimate freedom to live wherever you want, and then you can minimize your expenses as low as possible, right? So the other way that I would probably go if I had to start over again, if let's say the cost of apartments in my area was dramatically higher, then what I probably would see myself doing is maybe just living in getting a car and then living in a car or something like that, and then just focusing on creating content as much as possible, or seeing if I can make money from my phone. And I would just focus on that very heavily, and that's kind of the route that I would take, as far as stacking income. So that is really the main thing that you want to do: stack income as much as possible, manifest the highest paying job that you can in your area, and then of course then try to find a good deal in your area if you can. So that is my recommendation for how you could potentially move out. Let me know if what your biggest takeaway from this video was, if you found this helpful. If you disagree with anything that I've said, share your opinion down below. Give us a thumbs up if you found value here, and take care. All the best.